Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Institute's panel discussion on how the copyright system works for musicians today. My name is Devlin Hartline, and I'm legal fellow at Hudson's Forum for Intellectual Property. And I'm thrilled to be here today with three expert panelists who all work in the music industry. The copyright system, which dates back to 1790 in the United States, is based on the idea that the best way to promote the public good is by empowering copyright owners to pursue their own private interests. And it accomplishes this task by giving exclusive rights, which are property rights, to creators so that they can use them in the marketplace and hopefully get a return for their creative labors. Well, at least that's the theory. The reality on the ground is what we're here to talk about today. Everybody loves music, and music is everywhere. It's being broadcast all around us on the airwaves, and there's no shortage of music online. But while the current situation is wonderful for consumers, the move to digital has presented several new challenges for professional musicians who are trying to earn a living. And to discuss these challenges for musicians, we have three great panelists. We have Ben Bierman, who's a multi-instrumentalist, composer, and associate professor of music at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. We have the wonderful singer-songwriter Amanda Colleen Williams, who owns Songpreneurs LLC. And we have David Lowry, who's a performer, a songwriter, and a senior lecturer in the music business at the University of Georgia. And so we're going to start with opening remarks from each of the panelists, and then we'll have a moderated discussion about how well the copyright system works, or more likely, how well it doesn't work. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ben for opening remarks.
Okay, well, thank you, Devlin. Really happy to be here. My interest in artist rights in general stems from watching the business of music beyond the big stars deteriorate. The middle and working classes in the business are becoming the working poor, mimicking the 99% and the 1% in the economy in general. I've been in it for around 50 years, and things really started to shift in the late 90s, corresponding to Napster. This was the beginning of a long and slippery slope. We now have a society that considers music one of the most important aspects of our lives, and yet has come to see it as something that should either be free or very cheap, and musicians are not respected as working people economically. This concern led me to the areas of copyright and infringement, which are a lifetime study, I'm finding. And that's what I've been doing, trying to learn about the issues and trying to take some action in ways that I can. I do this through several organizations, including the Musicians Workers Alliance, the MWA, and the Authors Guild, as I'm also an author. I write about music. And I've been speaking and participating in conferences, panels such as this, both in the legal world and the world of music scholarship, because I am an academic and scholar, and something that became part of my life late in life, in my 50s, after 35 years as a freelance trumpet player in New York City. All of us take our own approaches to how to try and move forward in this area, and mine are evolving. Certainly, I see education on these issues as a big part of how I feel I can help, so I'm happy to be at things like this, along with my any lobbying and activism that I can take part in. I've also been writing on the subject, and how I do that's a work in progress, but I'm extremely pleased to be here. Devlin, I met you simply by reaching out after being impressed by you on one of these panels, the same way I have met many important people in this area. And now I get to meet two more exciting activists. I'm really lucky, and if I'm really lucky, someone will reach out to me after listening to us today. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Well, it's great to have you, Ben, and I do hear that construction going on behind you. So it is what it is. So no, I'm so glad you reached out to me, and I think we really hit it off, and it's great to be working with you. So thanks for being here. So next, I want to go to Amanda.
Well, hello, Devlin and everybody. I'm Amanda Colleen Williams. I'm a singer-songwriter based in Nashville, Tennessee, originally from East Tennessee, and I'm a second-generation professional songwriter and earn my living from copyright, both from my song royalty and from my intellectual property that I use with my proprietary curriculum that guides people through the complexities of copyright from the point of view of a person who earns their living that way. And I just want to hold this up. This was my dad, Kim Williams. He wrote 16 number ones, mostly starting in the 90s. He raised me. He took our family off Social Security and disability because he was burned 60% of his body in 1974. And he was able to use the proceeds of his creative works as a songwriter to take our family off government subsidy and become one of the top earners in this field. So I'm very passionate about helping to protect and respect copyright and all intellectual property for future generations for their gainful employment as well. And it's just an honor to be here, and thank you.
Well, and thank you, Amanda, for being here. And it's great to hear your story. You know, I hang out with copyright geeks and we talk about copyright in theory, but it's so great to have you all here because you actually live and breathe this stuff. So thank you for being here. And finally, last but certainly not least, I'll turn it over to David Lowery.
Hey, yeah. So thanks, Devlin. We've known each other for a while here, and Amanda's been part of my artist rights symposium before, and a spectacular speaker at that. And it's nice to meet you, Ben. I'm David Lowery. I started a band in 1983 called Camper Van Beethoven. It was a side project. We went on to record an album for $400 in 1984. We put it out in 1985 on our own label. And from that, I eventually had platinum records with my follow-on band, Cracker, lots of what we would call modern rock hits in the day, and was a producer of some note. And at first was very pro-digital. My background was mathematics and computers. I was very pro-digital. I realized that there was going to be problems when sort of the internet came about and computers were linked together and we could freely share files and stuff like that. But I thought that somehow what we lost would sort of be made up. Those of us who are performers and artists would make it up sort of through the disintermediation process. That is sort of the elimination of gatekeepers being able to deal directly with our fans. I kind of held that opinion for a while, and then I always describe it not as so much as a light bulb coming on, but a fluorescent light with a bad ballast that's blinking and trying to come on, and then it finally comes on. And I realized that really what we had done is just empowered all of these unaccountable digital monopolies, and it was going to be really bad for us. So I started speaking out about that in 2011, first at technology conferences. And, you know, what I saw as the failings of the copyright system, which actually are not exactly failings of the copyright system, but the fact that we created these loopholes for these digital monopolies, and what you could have predicted happened. All right.
Great. Thanks for being here, David. And it's always great to see you. I listened to your music in college all the time, so it's always great to see you. So let's start with the first question, and so I just kind of want to talk generally about just the limited fair market value for music. So people love music, and there's more of it available than ever before. But what most people probably don't think about is how the marketplace is working for the average musician. And so I want to ask each of you, what do you think are the main obstacles to musicians earning a living today? And how big of a problem is copyright infringement? And so any of you can chime in.
If you want me to start with it, I mean, one of the biggest issues, and I think is that there is never really been a free market for songs. When it comes to mechanical licenses, which is the royalty that a songwriter gets for the copying of their songs, and the public performance right, there has been two major federal interventions into that marketplace, which has actually limited the value of songs, I think. And it's hard to tease out how badly or how off that market value is. because it's been so long. So essentially, the songwriter's performance right is sort of it's governed essentially by the BMI and ASCAP rate courts, which were essentially set up under a consent decree back in the late 40s, early 50s. And in the case of the mechanical royalty since 1909, essentially the federal government has set that rate. It's changed how they set the rate. And so it's often just sort of hard to tease out exactly how far that royalty is off, right? So that's one of the biggest problems. And then there's the matter that we have this kind of, you can think of infringement being a problem in that, it's sort of pirate sites, things like Napster back in 1999 through 2000 and the follow on, torrenting and all that stuff. But there's a kind of softer kind of infringement whereby platforms like, for instance, YouTube, which allow user uploads, you're often competing with licensed instances of your work with unlicensed instances of your work. And this means that rate that you negotiate with YouTube is kind of against that sort of, you're sort of negotiating it with that in mind, that if you don't agree to a deal with YouTube, essentially those user-generated instances of your music will just happen anyway, right? So sort of like we're negotiating with a gun to our head, essentially.
All right, Amanda, Ben, do you have any thoughts?
Well, that's a nice wrap up that David gave, and I guess my perspective, like I said, I made a living for most of my life as a freelance trumpet player. It wasn't about royalties. It wasn't about copyright. I am a composer, but I kind of come at it from a little bit of a different perspective as a result. And not only is it messing up our opportunity to make money off of our recordings, but it's really drastically hurt the live music business. So the entire business is being affected by all of this. And like David said, all these uploads that we're competing with ourselves, right? And how can you compete with free, right? That's kind of the standard line, right? You can't compete with free. And so consequently, the public just doesn't see the economic value of music anymore. It's expected to be free. It's expected to be $10 for all the music in the world. People don't want, and this affects everything all the way down the chain. I see it in clubs. People, I see it in wages being stagnant. I see it in lack of work. I see people not hiring bands the way they used to. So it's not just about the royalties. It's not just about copyright. And it starts there. It starts with the lack of respect there, and then it filters down. So for me, I really see it as, and like I said in my little introduction, I was never a top person, but I made a living. I supported my family as a trumpet player. I was a solid musician. I'm a solid musician. I was a hard worker, and that was available to me. That's not the case anymore for people. It's big artists are doing just fine, and for everybody else, it's really, really tough. So it's a whole big picture.
Just to chime in, I think the greatest problems to fairness are the lack of practical knowledge of basically people who are actually trying to make a living in the business, or people who are trying to protect other people's right to make a living. It's not something that's common sense. This copyright thing is not common sense. It's decently easy to understand when you break it down into its fundamentals, but another reason that it's not, I guess, fair at this time is that there's so much complexity of the subject, and it's reams and reams of laws, reams and reams of policy that really sometimes don't get at the problem from the point of view of the people who are trying to make a living here. Fear of punishment. And that goes from the people who are trying to utilize the songs properly. You hear all these stories about people who are just little independents trying to license something somewhere and they can't figure out how to do it. And you'd think that would be easy in this day and age, but it really isn't. And there are so many different tasks and work tasks. The sheer volume of work tasks that have to be done by the independent songwriter music person to actually take music to market, I think that would stagger a lot of people to try to sit and shadow someone who actually does this. And also the overall music market value, it's so interrelated with every other type of intellectual property consumption that we have in media that it's almost impossible to pull the value of what that particular piece of music is worth out from, say, its involvement in a broadcast situation, or certainly an album situation, a video game, a movie, those kinds of things. And then also what the other folks are getting at here is that the importance of music gets confused a lot of times with other things. And really, you can't divide these issues up. It really comes down to a principle-based way of looking at commerce and economics and fairness and respect. And it really can't be taken without looking at that broader, bigger picture. And also this issue of supply and demand. And I know you're going to get more into these issues, but it's just a lot. There's so much going on that it's tough for just the one independent person to navigate this system.
Great, thanks. So I want to turn back to something that Ben brought up, and that's streaming, right? And so people, myself included, are spoiled with these all-you-can-eat buffets where you get millions and millions of songs for about $10 a month, and that's amazing for consumers. But I want to hear, how does streaming impact the ability of musicians to make a living?
I think that it depends on who you are. You know, in terms of this business, if I speak as a songwriter, then I'm speaking not as an artist. If I'm speaking as a venue owner, I'm speaking not as a songwriter and a publisher. And if I'm speaking as a record company, I'm speaking not as an artist or a songwriter. So that's silly, right? I'm just the same one entity. I'm trying to look at every aspect of where this monetization happens. But I don't know that in terms of an artist, you know, yes, please stream my music. I can do fine with that, especially if you stream me a lot. Go find me online, Amanda Colleen Williams, stream. But as a songwriter, I'm earning $86 for 5 million streams. And that's as a songwriter and a publisher both. My dad would not have gotten off Social Security if he was promised $86 for his 5 million units, because in that day with the physical units, that amount for a statutory payment is $455,000 for that same 5 million units of consumption. And then in the question, it says that streaming is amazing for the consumer, but I don't know that that's always true, because it depends on what your purpose is for listening. If your purpose is to just kind of get a smorgasbord of everything out there and you're just skimming the surface and it's great and you're dotting along in your car or your home and you love what you hear and it's awesome, cool. But if you're looking for a depth of musical integrity, let's say, in terms of not just the music that's out there, but I'm talking about the audio quality in terms of when you compare the data that's embodied in, let's say, a WAV file with what's embodied in a streaming file, there's a lot of missing elements to our music that isn't consumable in zeros and ones. And that's not a slam to digital, that's just the nature of that particular form in that medium. And of course, David, as the mathematician, can tell you the exact ratios probably of, if you take your lyric sheet, let's say that the lyric sheet for your song is your WAV file, and then you go to an MP3 file, you can read 1 out of every 10 words. And you think about what that meaning does to that lyric. And then if you go to a stream, then you read 1 out of every 30 words. And a lot of the healing that comes from music, and that's not a far-fetched idea, because throughout history, culturally, historically, in every society, we have examples of music as healing, as unifying, as a way of communication. And now in this modern system, that's not necessarily the primary outlook of the consumer coming to access his music. And therefore, you look at the mental health crises that are happening. You look at a lot of the problems that are happening with consumers related to and not related to music. And I think that perhaps some really smart people could make a connection between the medium that people access that music and their overall well-being.
Amanda, that's a really, really great point. Great points, and people. I don't think people realize how bad the sound is on these streaming services, and it's another kind of. It relates back to me again to what I was talking about, a lack of respect. It's the music is not being respected with that poor quality of sound. And another aspect along with that is, people keep trying to talk about the death of the album, and it's never musicians that are talking about the death of the album. Musicians think about these things generally. We think about creating an entire concept. We work hard and to make a statement throughout a record. And some people are just going for singles, and that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But most of us aren't doing that. And the idea of the album is disappearing, but not from the artist. It's from the way the music is put out there and how people are listening to it. So that's a big part of, I have a new record just about to be put out, and at the end of the month. And you're supposed to listen to the whole thing. That's it. That's how you understand it. You don't just understand it if you just listen to one song. That doesn't represent it. So that's another aspect of it, along with the sound quality. But also, when I talk to younger musicians, I've been around a long time. We all are experienced people. Talking to young musicians who are just trying to get into the field, when you really get to talking to them, if you make them get past simple statements, you'll see that they don't have a clue of how they're going to be able to make any semblance of a living. Some people do well with streaming. Yes, some people can do well. Some bands are doing well, but most music doesn't even get listened to. Right. I guess it's kind of a primary motivation for me, because I was able at 18, 19 years old, I was able to look at music as a career, a viable career with a path in. That's not really there. That's not really there now. And I see young people, and they're just as good, maybe better, and there's just not. There's the live music business is not good. The revenue from streaming is not good. People aren't buying music. So one thing I have my family over, my 3 sons and their families over the other day, and I ran this by them. But I think people should be buying music. That's one thing we should be trying to get people to do. Not just stream. Let's get the CD players back. Get your turntable back. Buy a whole album download. Buy an album download a month. Buy a CD a month. The public has to support music economically, not just listening to it, right? So, your question, you see, we're getting into all kinds of stuff. You say, what's it like for a musician to make a living? It's really, really tough, and it's getting to be impossible for a young person to actually make a sustainable living and raise a family if that's what they choose to do.
Well, if we're talking about, these are all great points, and sort of the streaming, you're basically Amanda and Ben are talking about the commoditization of music, both economically and culturally. And I still say you can tie that back to the exceptions that are granted under Copyright Act, like for songwriters and such. Because look, if I made shirts, right? And there was a federal rule that said, well, if you want to have a shirt store, all shirts, we're just going to pay a percentage of revenue to the shirt makers, right? So, the store's like, well, okay, how about I do this? It's $10 for any shirt in the store. So not only do they say it's a percentage, right? So the federal government sets the price of these shirts, right? And so maybe the store selling all the shirts for $10. It's a company called Shirtify, and so $10, $3 are staying with the store, $7 are going to the musician, right? So what works under that scheme is like basically the shirt T-shirts, that semi-ironic American flag T-shirts that you make in Malaysia or Cambodia or something like that, right? A nice knit long sleeve polo like that is not going to be profitable. So in a similar way, jazz is not going to be profitable under a flat rate streaming plan. Stoner gloom metal is not going to be profitable, right? Only your most mass market stuff is going to be profitable under this scheme. And then that has all these add-on effects that we're talking about here, right? By the way, one of the problems with why live music was so heavily impacted on this is we built a live music industry based on the fact that musicians would go out and tour, break even, and then come back home, and you would have generated sales that you could live on, right? That's ultimately what the music business was in the 90s and before. And we kind of haven't totally let go of that. And that's one of the problems too, right? We haven't let go of that.
I just want to say one more thing too, is that I had to research a lot of this to know anything about it, because even with a music business degree, it's tough to understand copyright other than just academically, unless you really dive in and think about it yourself, see how it actually works for you. But in that, I started looking, okay, what are the principles of economics? I took economics. I couldn't remember any principles being taught. Of course, I went back to my books and saw there are principles of economics. And one thing that applies to this streaming issue is a thing called an externality, which is where something that's outside of the system comes in and makes rules that those in the system have to abide by without understanding what that system does. And I think a lot of us are guilty of that. I mean, I know I've made comments like, blanket comments about, oh, we should do this. Well, if I want to do those things with my songs, then that's my prerogative and my right. As I say to my students and clients, you can't do wrong with your own song. But when you're dealing with someone else's intellectual property, you may be doing things that they may not appreciate and that may not make sense in the overall view of things. And therefore, this one-size-fits-all model for music is really we've outworn it, I think. We've outgrown it, perhaps.
That's a good point. That's a really good point that Amanda makes. Like, what works for, somebody like Taylor Swift isn't necessarily going to work for me, right? And that was the one great thing about copyright. You just kind of leave it to the individual owners to decide what they're going to do and monetize their work. Plenty of people have made a good living essentially giving away their recordings for free. I mean, look at, say, Fish or something like that. But that doesn't work for everybody. And that's one of the problems with exceptions to copyright, is they sort of force everybody into one business model.
Thanks. Wow, it's fascinating listening to you all, and I think that most people don't realize how many rates are actually set by statute, right? So when Amanda's dad had a #1 hit people were buying physical albums, and you could make a good living from that, right? Especially if you sold thousands and thousands of albums. But today, with streaming rates, if you have an album and it's even more popular and millions of people listen to it, you actually get paid less than in the days when you sold physical albums. And so it just seems crazy to me. And I always feel like Spotify and Amazon Music and all these services should cost a lot more given the value that as a consumer you get. And so, and speaking of rates that are set by statute, most people probably don't realize that when you listen to music on the radio, and probably millions and millions of people do this every day when you're in your car. So FM radio, you're listening to music. The recording artist, the Taylor Swift or the Cracker or whoever it is, the recording artist does not get paid for those listens. And in fact, the United States is the only democratic country on earth that doesn't have a terrestrial radio public performance right. So the songwriter gets something, the person who wrote the song, but not the person who recorded the song. And so there have been efforts over the years to remedy this inequity. And right now there's a bill that's been introduced called the American Music Fairness Act, or the AMFA. And so I wanted to ask you all, how important is this to have a performance right for recording artists for over-the-air broadcasts?
That's crucial. It's crucial, and it plays, the deficit plays out in other ways besides just not getting income from radio plays here, but also internationally, because internationally that right is respected, but since we don't respect it, then we don't get payments from international performances. So each of these things kind of just keeps reaching out to make everything worse and worse and worse, and it just seems like a no-brainer. And when you look at the act, it's pretty straightforward, and to me, and you kind of can't imagine why they wouldn't vote for this, and why would be, since we're the only country besides, what is it, Iran and North Korea or something like that doesn't do this. So it's hard to understand. But on the other hand, it's so similar to so many other things, which is corporate interest. And the AM FM radio stations, they're given free rein to do this so they can make money, right? And these are huge corporations. And this is the same thing with the exceptions David's talking about, in terms of uploading to YouTube and the exceptions that they're given. These are corporate giveaways, and these are the biggest corporations in the world that just are getting all these benefits while musicians get nothing. We're all, just so people know, we're always the last ones to make anything off anything we do. That's just the way the music business works. We're always the last ones. So there's a lot of massive corporate lobbying and corporate interests that go into these things.
Yeah, I was just going to say that people should see this not so much as a handout to musicians as a subsidy for corporations. It's a kind of, I would call it like, it's a kind of crony capitalism, right? And again, it's not exactly a exception to copyright law. It's just, so for instance, what the Copyright Act says, it limits the public performance right on sound recordings, right? That's a public performance is usually an exclusive right that a songwriter or anybody who owns a work or a recording or something like that would normally have. And there's a limit on where that is applied. So the Copyright Act actually sort of limits that. So for instance, like satellite and digital broadcasts will pay a public performance to performers, but AM FM radio is sort of, and to a certain extent, I guess would include television too, in certain situations, are excluded from having to pay that royalty. So again, look, if I'm going to be buying a car and buying my food and stuff like that in the free market,
Well, and the theory always was, we're not going to pay musicians to play their songs on the radio, but we're doing them a favor by giving them exposure, and then people will go out and buy their albums, right? So that was how they justified it.
Well, that's the radio station's argument, but then, okay, and there is a sordid history of radio stations and performers and managers paying radio stations for airplay, right? And so obviously in some situations, somebody thought that was valuable. The value went the other way, but I mean, go ahead and try to have a classic rock station without, say, the Eagles and Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. Like, nobody's going to listen to your classic rock station. So clearly the recordings are bringing you value.
Part of my role in all of these panels, I think, is just I try to stick with the basics of the underlying issues. And so basically it's backwards in your video here, but this is a P with the circle around it. That's the copyright that protects the sound recording. And so what you have when you have music is that and it's because it stands for phonogram, and that's why it's there. But when you have the two copyrights, one of them protects the song, the composition, and the other one protects the recording. So anytime a recording is made of a song, you've got the copyright, the song is embodied within the recording, you see? So you can't really separate the two. And there's a lot of different, issues about the radio formats. And just as they were saying, your terrestrial FM radio does not pay currently the performance income. However, those same stations with their digital component do. They do pay for both the P copyright and the C copyright. And, that creates a lot of contention and inner battles within the music industry itself, because it pits us, the songwriter, against us, the writer. I mean, us against the artist. And then it pits the publishers against the record labels and all of that. And really what we need to look for is mutual self-interest. If you have self-interest, it's easy to see why you would support a certain particular policy or an ideal or whatever it is. When you have individuals whose self-interest is not apparent, it's hard to know what they're actually trying to do. Maybe they mean well, but without the practical experience of actually walking in the shoes of the person who makes their living this way, they may be trying to write a song in E sharp because that's what they think they should do. It's possible. Let's do it. Let's write a song in B sharp. And, that may be some of the problem that we see across the board.
Just to add it, one little quick comment. Both David and Amanda have used a word that I think is really important, which is fairness. And that's kind of a bottom line that we're talking about. Is just, and David was very specifically talking about, well, why aren't we part of the free market? It's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Great, thanks, Sal. So I want to talk about just the idea that copyright infringement has been normalized, and whether or not we need to educate people. So I think part of the piracy problem stems from people simply not even knowing that downloading something or on YouTube or whatever is a copyright infringement, or perhaps even worse, they do know it's infringement and they just simply don't care. And so I'm wondering, how do we educate members of the public so that they actually understand that piracy is harming musicians? And so musicians are already struggling in the digital age, and then the piracy just adds to it. So I'm just wondering, what can we do to better inform people about this problem?
I think that's a $1 million question. I don't have $1 million answer. That's something that I've always thought was maybe the most important thing we could do, or certainly the most important thing I could do, but it just seems very fundamental to this issue and to our needs. And it's, even musicians aren't very good about this. You know, musicians share unlicensed links all the time. You know, musicians post all kinds of stuff. You know, people just in general, you're right. It's just kind of, it's not really it's not, people don't understand. They don't understand. And if even musicians aren't understanding, you know it's a problem. And also, there's another thing that's making it hard is it's also ubiquitous now. It's just become, it's so normalized, and people are so used to the convenience of having everything in one place, you know, and having everything available, that it's become a different world. So can't say the best way for us to do this, but I believe that certainly this education part of it is maybe the most crucial thing along with any kind of legislative lobbying we can do. But I think stuff like this, stuff like panels like this, we're all doing this all the time. I mean, we all have music careers and we have all kinds of careers, but here we are spending time on this, right? And I think a lot of people are doing that. So this is an important thing, right? Stuff like things that you're doing, services that you're providing, we're all trying to do that. I think that's what we're trying to do. I think that's what we're trying to do today, right? And beyond that, you know, it's really, you know, how do we get a larger audience to do that? And so I'm trying to figure that out.
I started a program. Over the years, I have put a lot of time and investment into this program. I call it Song Life. And I've seen thousands and thousands of students in K-12, universities, law, schools. I've seen panels of judges from around the world at the United States Patent and Trademark Office in their annual or biannual copyright conference. And I have a proprietary solution that can bring education to everybody from the 7-year-old all the way up to their parents and caregivers all across the board. Education has been overlooked in solving of these problems for a very long time. I've presented this information throughout the years to countless people in the music industry, countless people in policy making, countless people in government. My goal is to provide my copyright lecture to the Congress. Who else needs to understand intellectual property more than Congress? Certainly at this time in some of these intellectual property boards and things like that. And the reason is because when you explain it in a way that cuts through a lot of the parts that make it confusing, then everybody from that 7-year-old to that person who is an expert in their particular field can get onto that same page and that same level and see the importance of protecting and respecting our mutually created property. It is truly one of the foundational elements of democracy that we recognize not only property and private property, but the ability of the individual to create property and then to monetize that. Did you know that Bolivia, one of the most, I guess you call it a poor country, so it's like people talk about my Appalachia, we're a poor country too, I guess. But you have the ability there in 1995 in Bolivia, 11% of their gross domestic product was cottage jewelry makers. 11%. And you look at that and you apply that to all of the boys and girls in the schools today. You remember back, David and I, we're probably about the same age, all of us here. And we maybe remember in school when we were all taught about recycling and how important recycling was for the future of our planet and our people. This is the time when we take that same approach to copyright and intellectual property education, because it really is a foundational element of our democracy. And if we let that go now, then we're going to be kicking that ball another 20 years down the road. And I've been standing here bouncing it, trying to figure out how to get other people to play and to help to not just spread some kind of a political dogma or stand on the side of some particular policy, but to actually get to the root of our mutual problems here in this field. Because honestly, when you look at the problems that confront and face the individual person who creates intellectual property for a living, you're looking at a microcosm of the problems of humanity. And if we could start solving those problems together in this way right now, then we should. And we have no reason not to. And one individual, I've been told by these giant corporations over the years, you're too small to do this work. You're just one person. That's not really true, because I don't speak just on my own behalf. I'm a mother. I speak on behalf of the kids that are coming up these days that are hopeless. They have no hope for their future. Either that or they're deluded with their notion. They think they're going to give away everything and somehow at the end of the day be able to take care of themselves. And maybe that's because they feel so benevolent, or maybe they just feel so lowly. I don't know what the cause is. And honestly, I'm right there with you. But the bottom line is that by championing these programs like mine that has been tried and tested, instead of trying to pluck pieces of it and go and try to create a new system with no testing, probably not the best idea. One of the things that we can do is champion the people who are making a living with this and actually listen to the people who are making a living and then find our solutions there.
David, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, Amanda's, I think both Ben and Amanda make great points about how we view this. It should be noted, though, we didn't get here by accident. When the internet, sort of the tech companies first, were coming about and trying to, figure out what their business model was and stuff like that, they pretty quickly discovered that copyright was an impediment, was going to impede their growth, right? And so there was a explicit lobbying and public policy campaign carried out by Silicon Valley to basically grant exceptions to copyright that would help their business model. Again, you got to see this as a subsidy. Now, what they did was say, hey, we're protecting our users. Our users are just sharing this work and stuff like that. They shouldn't be suddenly stung with a copyright infringement lawsuit, right? But that was completely dishonest. They were basically building platforms that wanted to use workers, small individual workers like songwriters and musicians and stuff like that, to use their work without getting licenses. Like, right? Would a radio station go on the air and play music without licenses and then say, oh no, but our listeners need to have music in their life, right? That's essentially what these digital platforms did. And it kind of worked because I think people are just, I don't know, they're just not willing to look at the big picture of what's happening here. So essentially, we created this loophole in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, I think it's generally under Section 512, which allows services to essentially host material uploaded by their users that for which they have no licenses, right? And that is just, again, it's a form of crony capitalism, is I think the best way to look at it, right? And a lot of people, there was a lot of money at stake. If they could get this law passed, which they, this exception into copyright law, they would make a lot of money. And they did, right? And that's not fair. It was essentially subsidized by creators. The growth of those tech companies was completely subsidized by creators. So I don't know, why don't I have stock in that company? Why don't I have options in that company? Why don't I get stock warrants? I helped build that company.
And my dad used to have a funny statement too. He'd say, yeah, people would think if you told people they should get their cheeseburgers for free, they'd want them too.
Well,
Yeah, I think we could probably talk for hours about just the DMCA itself. I'm sorry, Ben, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Well, no, I don't know where you hoped to take it next, and I know we're winding down, but the I just have been sitting in participating in the United States Copyright Office discussions on technical measures, right? Technical measures that would not allow people to upload files without permission or without licensing, and it's been pretty I guess I could say interesting. Interesting and frustrating because you just keep hearing you keep hearing the same things from the companies that David's talking about. You know, you just keep they keep problematizing, and they keep putting all these things in the way of a very basic problem that Amanda tries to put it, is putting it down to very basic things, and they get in the way of that by saying, well, but this exception and this exception and that exception, and the corporate interest and the corporate power on top of that seems to be very effective in halting any kind of progress at all. And it's pretty frustrating to watch when you see such that, the three of us, we keep saying how kind of simple these issues are in a way, but then the more they complicate it, the more they make it impossible for anything to move forward.
Good, well said, Ben, and it's been a pleasure working with you on the technical measure stuff. So we as you mentioned, though, we are running out of time, and so I have one quick question for the three of you, and this is about how we consume music. So I think we're all pretty similar in age, and we probably have the same experience. I bought the same album on record, cassette, and CD, and maybe even a digital download, right? So I've got, bookshelves and bookshelves full of albums that I've bought over the years. My kids, on the other hand, who are teenagers, they have never even once bought an album, not once. And even though I subscribe to Amazon Music, Sirius XM, and Apple Music, they don't use that either. They get all of their music, all of it, from YouTube. And so my question for you all is, given this situation, and I think my kids are pretty typical, if you could change one thing, what would it be?
Well, you mentioned it, YouTube. 50% of all consumer streams, it varies day to day, year to year, week to week, month to month. 50% of all, usually more than 50% of all streams occur on YouTube. The rate that YouTube pays to songwriters is probably somewhere between about 1/10 and 1/20 of what Spotify pays, right? Apple Music pays, right? It's very, very low. And I think that's largely a function of the fact that they benefit from this user-generated content upload sort of thing, the DMCA safe harbor. So I would change that. I would move YouTube's rates up to what Spotify and Apple Music pay.
I mean, you talk about an album, I'm gonna hold mine up, because if you want to help the songwriter, you got to download, you got to buy the physical, because as I said earlier, streaming for the songwriter publisher, 5 million units, just recently paid me, with the 10% deduction for my admin, it was $86 for 5 million units streaming. Now, from the physical unit sales or the download, that same amount, the 5 million consumption, would have been $455,000. So if I could change one thing, it would be that here's the formula. You've got your rights to copy, you've got a license, and you pay royalty. And that goes for everybody. That goes for people. If you want if you're a tech company and you want to make a sustainable living, then you do protect your intellectual property. And that is the same for me. And it's just principle based. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if I had one thing to change, I would say people should buy music. People should buy CDs and albums and full album downloads, not single, full albums. And I would like to start a movement that says we all buy one full album in some form a month if we can afford it. If everybody bought it, one CD, one album, or one full album download a month, boy, things would change.
And I've even presented my talks to kids that are in homeless shelters. That's where I actually got started doing it. Kids that are in state custody and in homeless shelters. And this one kid, after he heard me talk about it, he said, and he's homeless, right? He said, I will never illegally download again. I had no idea that what I was doing was that hurtful. I think that that's the case. I think that there's this great science fiction book the spaceship comes and blocks the sun from the earth, and all the earth people were like, we're dying, and you know what, that spaceship, they finally figured out how to communicate with that spaceship, and that spaceship didn't know it was blocking the sun. So maybe there's something to that.
That's great. I love that. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. It's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you all about how copyright works and how it doesn't work. And I feel like we've only scratched the surface of all the possible things that we could talk about. But I do want to give you all a chance if you have a quick final thought before we sign off. David, I'll start with you.
A final thought. Well, we're not totally helpless songwriters and performers. I've recently, the last 3 albums I released, I only released them as physical goods. And I'll eventually put them on streaming services, but I'm doing kind of like what the movie business does, which is where they window. Actually, I released it as physical goods, only available at shows first. So that's like theaters. And then I sold them directly from my website. And then, and so, maybe that's like the DVD business or something like that. And now I have, since I sold out of the physical copies, I do have 2 of the albums on Bandcamp, which is a really interesting platform because it lets you set the rate, right? I let people listen to it, songs 3 times for free streaming, and then they have to buy it, right? So, but that's because I own the recording, and the recording is not subject to as many exceptions to the Copyright Act. So I can control where those recordings go. I can't do that with songs.
Right. Amanda, final thoughts?
I just wanted to say thanks for having me here today, and I appreciate you talking to people who actually make their living from copyright. And I also just want to say, those of you that are in the tech companies, if you're in the schools, if you're in the government, look into amandacolinewilliams.com. Hire me to come and do my Song Life program for you. And there are tons of creative business opportunities to be had in this field. And together is how this renaissance will happen. And separate, it won't.
Great, thanks. Ben, I'll give you the final word.
I just want to say, I also say thank you, Devin, for having us. And it's great to meet David, great to meet Amanda. So nice to be here. And I just hope that we can, kind of do what Amanda's saying and just keep pushing forward, keep trying to get the word out. We're serving an important function, and and we have to keep doing it. Let's just keep spreading the word.
All right, that's a great note to end on. Thanks again to the 3 of you for joining us today. And I think it's been a great conversation. And so with that, we'll sign off.